Chapter 3 opens with John Keniston walking back down Mill Street, heading toward the garage where he left his car, though now that feels almost absurd, like something from another life. Just a short time ago, cars and errands and work schedules mattered. Now Middletown has been hurled unimaginably far into the future, and the whole world is dying. Even so, the shocking thing is how ordinary everything still looks. The brick buildings are the same, the streets are the same, the people are still moving around, talking, arguing, going about their routines. Only the strange red sunlight and the rapidly falling temperature reveal that something is terribly wrong. That ordinary quality unsettles Keniston more than ruins or monsters ever could have. He feels as if he's walking through a nightmare disguised as everyday life. All around him, people are trying to explain what has happened in familiar terms. Old Mike Witter, the watchman by the railroad crossing, grumbles about the freak cold and talks about building a fire, while his little dog shivers in fear as if it senses more than the humans do. Workers outside Joe's lunch speculate that a war has started, maybe even that an atomic bomb exploded overhead. Others dismiss it as lightning. Everyone has a theory, but no one knows the truth. Keniston does know it, and the burden of keeping that truth inside makes him feel almost guilty. He wants to cry out what has really happened, to tell them that the enemy isn't another nation at all, but time itself, an ancient catastrophe that has already erased whole civilizations from existence. But he cannot bring himself to say it. As he moves through town, he sees the first signs of strain spreading through Middletown. Men gather on the bridge to stare at the riverbed and puzzle over the vanished water. Beer parlors are filling early. Housewives complain that their radios only receive the local station, yet the town has not broken into panic. Stores are open. Children still ride bicycles. Women still carry groceries. The mills are only just now shutting down. Realizes that habit, the steady grip of ordinary work, has kept people calm so far. They are still anchored to routine, and routine is protecting them from the full meaning of what has happened. At Bud's garage, that same blindness to reality continues. Is busy repairing a carburetor and barely pays attention to the strange reports flooding in. Even when another man bursts in with news that the mills have shut down, Bud brushes it aside as just another rumor. When hints that this particular story is true, interprets it only as an economic disaster, groaning that another recession will ruin his business. He has no idea that the mills will never reopen because the world that supported them is gone forever. Says nothing. Instead, he rents a Jeep, fills spare gas cans, and begins quietly preparing for a more serious journey. He drives next to his boarding place on Walters Avenue, where even now life still clings to appearances. He gathers what he might need for survival and exploration: his rifle, shotgun, shells, warm clothing, gloves, a leather coat for Hubble. This practical preparation gives the chapter a new tone. The scientific mystery is turning into a survival story, is no longer merely trying to understand what happened. He is equipping himself for life on a transformed Earth. Then comes one of the chapter's most emotional scenes. Stops to see. Her aunt. Is worried about her flowers and asks whether she should cover them against the cold. Tells her yes, knowing all the while that it is useless. Her flowers, like so many small beautiful things of the old Earth, only have hours left to live. That realization hits him with special force. In a world-ending disaster, it is not only cities and industries that vanish, but roses, petunias, gardens, kitchens, and all the tender details of ordinary human life. When Carol appears, she quickly sees that something is deeply wrong. Unlike the others, she knows Keniston too well to accept an easy evasion. She asks him directly whether the stories are true about an atomic explosion over Middletown. He tells her yes, but tries to soften it by assuring her that there was no direct blast damage and no radiation danger in town. Even so, she can read the fear in his face. She senses that the real threat is something larger, stranger, and worse. Keniston wants to explain, but he hesitates. This is a personal turning point for him. He realizes that if he tells Carol the truth, he must also reveal the nature of his own secret work, the strange scientific life he has kept partly separate from her. He has always hoped he could postpone that moment. Now he cannot avoid it much longer. Their brief farewell is tender and painful. He tells her to stay in the house and promises to explain everything when he returns. She agrees, though she clearly knows he is withholding the worst of it. He kisses her and leaves, grateful at least that she is not hysterical. But inwardly, he is full of grief. He had imagined a future with Carol, marriage, a home, peace, stability, an end to loneliness. That future now seems shattered. Even if they survive, what kind of life can they possibly have on a frozen, dying world at the end of time? Back at the lab, Hubble is waiting with instruments, including a Geiger counter, ready to investigate the outside world. The two men head south, delayed only briefly by a police barricade until the mayor authorizes them to pass into the supposedly contaminated area. At first, the road runs through normal suburban farmland. Then, almost suddenly, everything changes. The road and green countryside simply stop. Beyond that boundary stretch endless rolling ochre plains under a dim red sun and a dark star-filled sky. There are no trees, no grass, no rivers, no signs of life, only scrub, dust, wind, and silence. Hubble checks his instruments and finds nothing radioactive. The terrible truth is even worse. This is not a bomb-blasted region. This is the actual face of the Earth a billion years in the future. And that is where the chapter ends. With Keniston and Hubble riding the rattling jeep out across the dead world, leaving the last familiar edge of Middletown behind them as they enter the silence of the dying planet. It's a powerful ending because the story moves from confusion into confirmation. Up to now, people could still imagine a war, a freak storm, or some strange accident. But now, the evidence is visible with their own eyes. The Earth itself has become ancient, barren, and almost lifeless. This chapter deepens the emotional weight of the story by contrasting cosmic disaster with ordinary human things: garages, lunches, flowers, radios, young love, and town routines. That contrast is what makes the apocalypse feel so haunting. The end of the world doesn't arrive with screaming chaos. It arrives while people are still fixing carburetors, sweeping porches, and wondering whether to cover the roses.